Ready?
Oh, darn.
So just to recap, we think that, grids are a really nice idea for manifesting. I think they really work. I use them myself, and I've been quite happy with the results of using them. So when we went to break, we were talking about the World Peace Grid that William Rand has placed around the world at the North and South Pole, in Israel, and on Maui. I think he's got one in his home in Michigan as well. And we talked about pairing the different crystals to your intention. It's not essential to do that, but it's very nice and helpful to leverage the energy in the crystal you're using. By all means, try and have at least something quartz on your crystal grid, because quartz is programmable and it will hold the intention and radiate that intention outwards according to how you've used your grid. So next we're going to talk about chakra balancing, and this is going to be hands-on. So we're going to pause the video again and go and do some hands-on, but let me just talk about the overall principles so that we know what's going to be going on. So first we're going to talk about doing chakra balancing with crystals. When we're using our Reiki and crystals, the easiest way that I found to do this, and again, be stimulated by using your imagination, and if you think of a different way to do it, by all means experiment and try that. So I've arrived at this way of doing it, and sometimes I do it differently. So I will pick up my crystal, and is anyone brave enough to hand me one? So you can just grab that piece of fluorite that's over there on the, and bring me that one. So we take the crystal in our hands, and we just clear it with our Reiki. It's on the second shelf down. Yeah, thank you ever so much. Sorry about that. So here is a piece of fluorite. Is that on screen?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You want me to have you pull up?
Huh?
Okay.
So we just hold it between our hands and clear it using our Reiki. And then you set your intention into it. So I will usually put a symbol over I use the power symbol usually to help activate the crystal, and then just place it on the chakra. So this stone's a little big. I would use a smaller one, probably a smoother one that doesn't have the jagged edges when I'm going to put that on someone. A nice little polished stone would be nice. And the general principle is that you just match the color in the crystal to the chakra center. So fluorite is this is fluorite, would be a wonderful energy for the heart chakra. But again, don't be confined. Don't say you have to have red crystals at the root and orange crystals at the sacral chakra and so on. But generally, that's a good idea, because the chakra, especially if it's out of balance, will resonate to the energy of that color, the color that it normally is. So, yellow for the solar plexus, you can use a citrine or yellow calcite or anything else that's yellow. But again, don't be confined by that. So we're going to be doing that hands-on in just a minute. Then we'll talk about chakra balancing with the pendulum. And again, we won't be demoing this, but you can, the point I wanted to make here with using your Reiki is that you can keep your Reiki flowing through the pendulum and allow the Reiki to flow through the pendulum as you balance the chakras. So if you pause it for just a minute, I'll go and grab a pendulum first, and we're all going to try this. So the pendulum, it's helpful if you just get a little swing going to it. And when you hold it in your hand, get a nice grip on the pendulum so that it's not dangling like this. When you dangle it, you want your innate body, your smart body. Works through a process called kinesiology. So you want your smart body to be commanding the pendulum. So hold it not too tightly, but between your thumb and forefinger, and catch the end part of the pendulum in your fingers like that, so that it's not dangling. And then you just get a little swing to it, and then you put it over the chakra. And if the chakra is in balance, So we're over this little guy's root chakra, and you see that's nicely balanced. It's turning nicely. So when we go to his sacral chakra, we see that the sacral chakra is blocked because the pendulum's not spinning. So that's how you tell if it's open or if it's blocked. You can also do it just by holding it still. And now we're over his solar plexus. And if the chakra's in balance, it will start to pick up a spin like this. And if the chakra's blocked, it will stay steady. So I'm commanding the pendulum here a little bit. Of course, Teddy doesn't really have chakras. But we're going to do this live in person. But you can do this on a live person and you'll be surprised. So the easiest way is to get a little bit of a swing going to it there. And then, you know, you'll see it catch up into a circle if that chakra's open. And then if it's not flowing, you can use your Reiki then, or using crystals, or just put Reiki on the chakra. And I like to very gently spin the chakra. And sometimes I rise up like this out of the energy. So the chakra is about 4 inches above the body. So you don't want to get too low with it, but you can just gently spin the chakra like this, just encouraging it to start moving. And of course, you're doing Reiki while you're doing this. It will also work if you just give Reiki to the area, to the chakra. You just let your Reiki flow on it. You'll find very often that that will be enough as well. So let's see. Are we going to do anything else before we? Okay, so we will pause here and we'll do some chakra balancing. So we just did the demo with the pendulums, and we had the question about setting intentions. If you just have the thought, is that enough? And my answer is sometimes I don't even yet have the thought. Like it's difficult to explain, but I've had the intention before I've thought about, I'm going to have the thought to do this. And it just starts to work. Just like when I was demonstrating, you know, I've put the pendulums away now, but just when I was demonstrating with the teddy and the pendulum turned for me, because I have the intention to demonstrate. It knew what I wanted to do. This happens to me all the time, that the pendulum knew what I wanted to do. Now you have to be careful to distinguish that between being actually in someone's chakras, because when I hold the pendulum over someone's chakra, I have no intention, because I don't want to influence whether it spins or not. I want it to find that person's energy, right? But when we clear using the pendulum, we set the intention then to clear. And that's when it starts to spin really big like that. And then it comes back almost to stop. And then it just starts to pick up the energy of the chakra, which is, you know, hopefully now opened. So you have to know when to turn your intention on and off. But once you, in the smallest, tiniest spark of your mind, have the intention, that's it. That's the intention. Like, you don't have to verbalize that again afterwards. Does that make sense? Okay, so it's a good question, and it's a difficult one to answer, but I guess when you work a lot in this field, doing this work, you just kind of, it just stuff just kinds of happens, and sometimes it's hard to explain, but it's almost like when energy shows up in the field before you've had the thought, that means there is some part of you that's having that thought before it's become a thought, if that makes sense. And I think that's what happens with intention. If you do Reiki every day, your Reiki just starts to flow, you know. And I've also found this is a little crazy, but I've also found this with my crystals. There are certain crystals that I will use to put on someone's chakras when they are blocked. And I don't have to clear them and set the intention every time, because those crystals know what to do. It's like they know their job almost. They know they're being called into action the minute they are put on somebody's body. And I've had comments from clients like, I had taken a crystal that I regularly use. It was a yellow calcite. I put it on the solar plexus. And she said to me, do you program your crystals? Because the minute you put that on me, I could feel it working. And she could feel its energy on her chakra. And I said, well, that's just because this particular crystal knows exactly what to do, because I use it, regularly. So play around with that just as you play around with everything else. Play with your pendulum, experiment, find the boundaries, find what's working and what's not. And when Lexi was doing the pendulum work on me the other day, because I can feel and I know where my chakras are because I'm sensitive to energy, it was a very different experience from when I do that on other people. And there was one chakra, so I had something out of balance. I don't remember what it was, but there was one chakra where she put it on and I could tell because I could feel it was off center. So I just asked her to move it. She moved it just an inch so that it came to the center of that chakra, and it immediately felt better for me. And it had been like swinging diagonally, and then it started going around. So again, if you can't, experiment on somebody, a friend who's willing to experiment with you and play and see if you can detect where those chakras are. Start at the top of the head, move the pendulum down and see where it starts to pick up. And bear in mind that you also have other chakras in the body. So there's a big one between the solar plexus and the heart is the diaphragm. The diaphragm will generate, it's like a chakra unto itself. So keep that in mind too, that you might be finding another chakra. If you're totally in the wrong area of the body and you can't find the solar plexus, you might not be picking up the solar plexus, you might be picking up something else. Okay, so we're on this slide now. Am I doing it right? This is the biggest question that we get. I don't know if I'm doing it right. You're doing it right. If you're doing Reiki, you're doing it right. So call on your intuition. Instead of trying to remember what your teacher told you, go inside and see, well, does it feel right? Does it feel like it's working? If it does, then you're doing it right. If it feels like you're doing it wrong, then do it differently. And so play with that again, experiment. I've done many distant Reiki experiments. I love to do them. This is one of the funnest ways to use your Reiki because you don't have to involve anybody else. You can give yourself distant Reiki. You can, this is one thing that I like to do is, and again, do this for a substantial amount of time. Do it for more than a minute or two. Send yourself like 10 minutes of Reiki. So I think I've got a slide on this. Yeah. So set a timer up for yourself, by which I mean put an alarm on your phone or on alarm clock or however you tune into alarms to, for instance, at 9 a.m. tomorrow morning, I'm going to sit down and receive my Reiki, which I'm going to send to myself now. So sit down and send yourself 10 minutes of Reiki. And then tomorrow, sit down and receive the Reiki that you pre-programmed for yourself. So you don't have to program it for a specific time. But let's say you know that tomorrow's going to be a difficult day for whatever reason, whatever's going on. And you'd like to have a little bit of Reiki to start your day off, send it to yourself in bed before you get up at the moment that alarm clock goes off. Send it to yourself, a day ahead, a week ahead, however far ahead you think of it. And then just experiment and see if you receive it, because you will receive it if you tune into it. Many times we forget to tune into the distant Reiki that we sent ourselves. That's why I suggest that you send Reiki. So I talked earlier about sending Reiki to somebody who's having surgery. So let's say they're having surgery at like 3 o'clock tomorrow, but you're going to be busy at work then, and you can't just stop and send them Reiki. Well, you can do it ahead of time. You can do it when you have time. So, Reiki the surgeon, the nurses, the operating room, the surgical instruments. You can even Reiki the cleaning staff, as I said before, and all of that. But you can program that Reiki to arrive. So you can program it to arrive at the time she's having the operation. You can program it to arrive beforehand if you want to Reiki the operating room and the surgeon and everybody else. You can program it to arrive. I like to program it for the person receiving the operation. I like to program it to arrive after the surgery, after the anesthetic has worn off, and at a time when they're not being disturbed. You know, after an operation, the nurses are fussing all over you all the time, and everybody's in and out, taking your temperature and putting needles in and out of you, so on. So I like to tell the universe, can you please find 30 minutes when that person is lying in recovery, out of anesthetic and undisturbed, and I will send it then. So look out for that, Julie. See if you, I'll be curious to know if you get it. So, okay, we're going to do a distance session. Let me just see what's, before we do the distance Reiki practice, let's just go on a few more slides because so we can see what kind of time we have. So everybody, a lot of people, I shouldn't say everybody, a lot of people have heard of this one. There was some research done during 9/11 when maybe we need to go into that link, but don't go there yet. We'll go there in a minute. So I'll just talk first and then we'll turn the video off. I'm just trying to read and think at the same time. Oh, yeah. So the Princeton University study, the spike in the global consciousness, that was 9/11. That was when they were measuring frequency, and that's where the link is for. But they were able to pick up that before the planes crashed into the building, the global consciousness had already registered the event. There was already a spike in the global consciousness. And the article talks about how they were measuring that. So that's what the link for the article is for. But I'm not going to discuss in detail all the details. You can go and read the article on the blog. But the point being that, as I was talking before about intention, when we have that thought, it's almost like there's a pre-thought to the thought that happens first. And it's as though the human consciousness knew that something terrible was about to happen. It spiked, and then the disaster happened. And then the global consciousness really went crazy because we all, saw it happen on TV or heard about it or read about it or whatever. And then we all moved into fear. But it's the point that your consciousness makes a difference. That's the point I'm trying to make. So when you make a financial contribution, I remember what I was trying to say now on this slide. When you give money to a disaster, that's one way of helping. And I'm not discouraging anybody from doing that. But another way of helping is just to send it Reiki, right? It's free, and you know it's going to get there. You know it's going to get there. You don't know if your money's going to get there. You don't know if it's going to get lost in some slush fund somewhere, or, won't get into all of that. But we know that, with the disclosures that have been going on, that not all of our charity money goes to charity. Let's just leave it at that. But your Reiki will definitely go there. Nobody's going to intercept that, right? Nobody's going to intercept it or waylay it. So you can make a difference by sending high vibration, positive energy to things like that. And Reiki, your favorite celebs, as I was saying earlier, all the people who are my, they don't know they're my mentors, but all the people I mentor with on YouTube, and these are mostly people who are what I'll call alternative truth, the alternative media, people who are bringing me the truth as best as they can discover it, and helping enlighten me and helping me, discover scientific proofs and evidences. I mean, I already mentioned Valerie Hunt and Eileen Day McCusick. There's David Wilcock, Corey Good, Jordan Sather. There's a whole bunch of other people that I follow that sometimes they go through hard times. And you can send them money. You can send them money through Patreon. That's a great thing to do to support them. But you can also just send them Reiki. So very often, I'll be watching something on YouTube and I'll realize that somebody is having a hard time over something. I would just send Reiki right there to the TV set. Of course, it's not going to the TV. My intention is to send it to the person who I'm watching on TV. So this is one way to support, your favorite people, your favorite actors, actresses, singers. Anybody, any authors that you read, you can send them Reiki. You know, Reiki your garden. Reiki helps your flowers grow. There was a lot of, I gave Reiki to my tree. It was devastated in the snowstorm last month, and all of the branches broke off. It's a 25-year-old tree, and it's right out there. It's very big, and my lawn was completely littered in dead branches, ripped off. And so I sent Reiki to it. A couple years ago, a hailstorm came through when my irises were in bloom, and just took every flower off the irises. And the irises, later on, a few weeks later, were absolutely covered in green fly. So I've never seen green fly on irises before, but they were clearly hurt, in the hailstorm, it broke down their immune system. And so they attracted all these little flies that were just thick, thronging on the stems and the leaves of the plants. So I gave them Reiki, and the next year they did just fine. That year they were finished, but the next year they did just fine. So I just stood out there and Reiki'd all the irises. So you can use it, in any kind of situation, anything that's growing in your garden, but it's especially useful if you're growing food, right? So use it if you're growing food or any diseased shrubs, plants, etc. You can send Reiki to anything, anywhere. We talk a lot about sending it to difficult situations like the dentist. If you're going for an interview, if you know you're going to have a meeting with your boss, and that's going to be tricky. If you have a performance review coming up, at work, you can send Reiki to anything. You can also send it to relationships. So let's say you're having a difficult time with your husband or your wife. You can send Reiki not just to that person, but to the relationship itself, because there's always an energy of relationship, and you can send it to the relationship with anybody. If you have a difficult coworker, if you have a client that you don't like seeing, you can send Reiki to that client and to the meeting with the client as well. So I had one time, I don't get very many clients who I don't like. I'll be honest, I'm very lucky. And I talked about that in my manifestation grid. I try and manifest clients who are right for me. But I had one who was very, very difficult to be around, and was hard for me. So I sent Reiki to that client, to that interaction, to that session, to the Reiki session. And the client arrived and got up on the Reiki table, and I started giving Reiki. He fell asleep within maybe 2 minutes and he slept through the whole session. And as I was giving him Reiki and looking at him asleep, I realized he's just one more hurting person. There was really nothing that difficult about him, and that I had no reason to be afraid of that one session. So, that's the power of Reiki. Don't just send it to your bad things either. Don't just send it to the hard times. Send it to the good times, make them even better. So if you are doing something fun, if you do have something fun planned, and send Reiki to it, wouldn't that be awesome? Just make it even better. So you can also, as we said, send Reiki to relationships. You don't have to Reiki the person in the relationship. You can just Reiki the relationship. Of course, you can Reiki the person as well. So this can be very helpful. I get a lot of times people will come in suffering from grief, and their mother or their father passed, and they had just kind of knew somewhere in the back of their mind that they were going to resolve some issue with that person, and it never got resolved. So there is always that grief and that longing and that remorse that, oh, I wish I would have done that. I wish I could have done that. I wish I would have said that. I should have told them that I loved them no matter what. You know, you don't have to feel that that relationship has ended, first of all, because that person is still around you. So you can continue to develop a relationship with that person in spirit. And remember that they've lost the human body at that point. So they've lost some of the, I'll say some of the ego. They may not necessarily have lost all of the ego, but they've definitely lost a lot of the clutter of emotion that we have when we come in as humans. But so you can work with them more effectively because they're no longer in ego in the same degree that we are. But you can send Reiki to that relationship as well. And that can heal the relationship even after, you think it might be too late. It's not too late. You can send Reiki to that relationship and to that person, and you can heal from that. You can experience. I've done this with my own dad. There were a lot of, I didn't have a bad relationship with my dad, but there are a lot of times I felt like I was ungrateful in his presence. And I didn't tell him how great he was. And I didn't tell him what a great dad he was. And, I'm living over here and he's living in the UK, and we didn't have, and he was a bit deaf. So we talked on the phone, but he couldn't always hear what I was saying. And so I had one of those relationships that kind of petered out at the end and wasn't as warm and loving as I wished it had been. But my relationship with him has evolved since he passed. I feel closer to him now. And I feel like we've had those exchanges. We've had those forgiveness moments. And I've had the opportunity to work through the things that I was remorseful about. Remember again, you can't, I just caught the last bullet that I wrote on that slide. You can't set an intention to heal a marriage that is not going to be healed, for example, or a relationship with someone that seems to be on the rocks. Reiki may heal that relationship and it may not. So it depends what is in the highest good of both people. Being in a relationship that's no longer serving you is not healthy, but you might be afraid to leave it behind because you're afraid of being alone. So Reiki will help you in the way that is in the highest good of all concerned. And that's the intention that you should have. So you can't direct Reiki, please heal this relationship so I don't have to break up from my husband. It won't necessarily work in that way. It will work maybe to give you the strength to leave if leaving is what needs to happen. It will give you maybe the strength to carry on if he leaves and you didn't want him to. So, but it might, you have to be open to the healing that comes with the Reiki. So I talked about this before, the many-to-one relationship and the one-to-many. Many people can give Reiki to one person, and there's great power in that. One person can give Reiki to many people. I've sometimes done Zoom sessions where I'm giving the Reiki and there are, several people on the Zoom session receiving the Reiki, and we do a recap at the end and everybody got the Reiki. Everybody had a story like, oh, I could feel it here, I could feel the tingling over here, and so on. So don't limit yourself to just doing Reiki to one person. Sometimes when I'm doing distant Reiki for someone, I'll set the intention to give myself Reiki as well. Or, to give my dog Reiki or something like that. So, Right, let's pause it here and do the distant Reiki practice. So we just did a practice distant Reiki session. So we're just going to cover this really briefly. I'm not going to go into all the symbols. I'm not going to say what they are. I'm not going to say how you use them. I'm just going to say that in Reiki level 1, you don't learn any symbols. And in Reiki level 2, you get the first 3. So you get the power symbol, which increases the power of the Reiki, the mental emotional symbol, and the distance symbol, which collapses space and time. They call it the distance symbol, but it works for time as well. And if you get into the physics of it, space and time are really just part of the same continuum. So if you take a master class, you get, depending on who you take it with and what style you take, you get at least one master symbol. In some, you get more than one. In Holy Fire Reiki, you get the Holy Fire master symbol. And then if you go on and take Karuna, you get 8 more symbols. And you learn to chant them as well, which is wonderful. The power of sound is really incredible, brings really incredible power to the Reiki. And then, of course, if you're a level 1 practitioner, you won't have the symbols, and that's okay. So I'm going to skip through all these. I'm just going to talk a little bit about the symbols. So the symbols do add, they change, what they do is they change the vibration, they empower it. And the way, I'm going to say change rather than raise, because they kind of help to direct it. And there's a wonderful video, I didn't include it in this presentation, that talks about the power of different sounds and how those sounds affect the organs of the body, for example. There's also been a lot of research done on chanting, Gregorian chants, and the effects those have on our energy field. And of course, there are theories that they used sound to construct the pyramids and some of those very ancient stone structures that have very precise organization of the stones that isn't even possible for us to do with equipment that we have today. We think a lot of that was done with the power of sound. So when you use the symbols, bear in mind that each symbol has a sound or a series of sounds to it, as well as the sacred geometry in the way that it's written. So we also know that there's a lot of power in sacred geometry. That's the whole concept behind the grid. And, you know, using the energy of the crystals, but you're also drawing the sacred geometry in the grid. So we know that as we write letters or, you know, in the Japanese pictograms or whatever we're writing, we know that that too has an energy of its own. So it's nice to use the symbols. It's nice to be able to have those different types of energies that we can call in for different reasons. You know, sometimes you just need a little extra power to your Reiki. Sometimes you want to bring that gentleness of the mental emotional symbol that helps people find a deeper degree of peace. So that's basically what I wanted to say about the symbols. So at this point, yeah, that's pretty much the end. So I'll do the conclusion, because then we're going to pause we'll end the tape, and we're just going to go and give each other some Reiki. So in conclusion, the reason why I wanted to do this kind of workshop is because we are at a difficult time on the earth. And there are a lot of people who have learned Reiki who aren't using it. And I truly believe that the power of Reiki can help. It can make a large contribution. And I've tried to show that through this series of slides in the different ways that it can make that contribution. But you don't have to be out there trying to save the world in order to save the world. You can just be quietly sitting at home in your own little corner of the world, giving Reiki to yourself, to a plant, or just putting Reiki out there into the global consciousness and asking Mother Earth to use it however she sees fit, or asking the universe to use it for whatever it's needed for. But every little bit helps. Every little bit of energy that we put out into the universe will help and contribute to the overall good, to the overall raising of Earth's vibration, to the overall elimination of the chaos that we are now going through. So I really like Reiki, and I really like using it, and I really like knowing that every time I use it, that energy is going out there. It's either helping someone specifically or it's helping something generally. So I hope that it's inspired you to go and rekindle your love of Reiki. You were drawn to it originally for a reason. So maybe, you know, maybe you can refine that spark, that reason, and become motivated to use it for something in your life. All righty, we will end it here, Lexi. Thank you